Hi, my name is Jeff, and welcome to this video documenting from beginning to end the process of building my 4x10 AVID Pro CNC with rotary axis and vertical table. There are a number of videos on YouTube already documenting AVID CNC builds, so I tried to go a little bit different angle, used a lot of time-lapse photography, and I'm going to point out some things that were either helpful to me or that I didn't know going into this. And I want to give a special thank you to Frank Howarth and Jay Bates. Their YouTube channels had some really good information regarding AVID CNC builds, and I'll throw links to them in the description. Hope you enjoy it. One thing I wish I could go back and undo in the way that I built the CNC is when you're doing a non-standard size like a 4x10 here, you have a couple different options. I originally had ordered the 4x4 CNC, but then decided to change the order to make a 4x10 and add the rotary axis, which meant that I needed to add a 6-foot extension table. And although there's instructions for extension, the extension kit, it's not like there's one single set of instructions for the 4x10 size of table or any other custom table. So you kind of have to figure it out as you go along, using multiple sets of instructions. And one of the things that I didn't think about when I was doing this is the supports that run the length of the table on the top. I kind of built the 4-foot section, as you can see here, and then built the 6-foot addition. And if I'd been thinking this through a little bit more, I probably would have used the 6-foot supports on the 4-foot section of the table so that where the two sections meet up, there isn't a clean break between the tables. And I think it would have just helped improve rigidity of the machine. Although I will say I haven't had any issues at this point. Just something that occurred to me after I had all the screws in there, and it was kind of going to be too much work to go back and change. One part of building the machine that threw me for a little bit of a loop was the fact that I have the 8-inch gantry, and the Z-axis that I got is actually the 12-inch travel Z-axis. I don't know if that was intentional for them to give me that one, or if maybe there was a supply issue or something, so they gave me the larger one, because it works just fine with the 8-inch. The only catch is when you go into Mach 4 to set up your machine, it needs to know how much travel there is, because the machine homes to the top of the Z-axis. And what that essentially meant was that I couldn't get the Z-axis to come down far enough to even do an auto touch plate 0 on the Z-axis until I went into Mach 4 and changed the machine parameters. All the specs for the Z-axes, the size and everything for the two of them are on the AVID support site, so you can go in there and measure it out, and that's what I ended up doing, because it was a little bit confusing at first, but then once I measured it I realized what was going on, made the change, and everything started working great. Throughout the build, I had a couple of support calls into AVID, and I gotta say they did an amazing job. The first major one was one of the boxes here, the CNC control box, had a short in it that was causing the 5 volt and one of the 48 volt power supplies not to put out any power. They got on the phone with me, had an electrical engineer. We went through some readings with my multimeter, and they very quickly sent me a new control box to replace the one that was having issues, and a return label, so I just shipped it right back to them. One tip that's worth mentioning is the cable lengths are not uniform, which maybe that's obvious to some people, but I didn't really think about it when I was pulling the parts out. And so the proximity sensor on the Z-axis, I accidentally put a cable that was a little bit too short for it. I mean, it reached, but it was very stretched to make it to the extent of the table later on. So I ended up having to pull that out and swap it out with the correct one, which was going to one of the other proximity sensors, which was a bit of unnecessary work. So if you're paying close attention, you'll notice the spindle that I install in this part of the video is the 3 horsepower spindle, but what actually ended up on the machine is the 4 horsepower spindle. And I just wanted to mention again, AVID CNC support was very good, both on the tech side and the order support. I changed my order about 4 times. I moved from Florida to Washington in the middle of the process, and so they, stopped routing some of the parts where I could go pick them up on will call. So there was a few parts that got mixed around in that process, but their order support team was amazing in helping me figure out what I did and didn't have and getting me the right stuff quickly. So here we're seeing the very first cuts with the machine, and I learned a hard lesson here that you always want to do your spindle warm-up because I had the dust collector on and had actually forgotten to turn on the spindle control. So you see the machine reset there a few seconds ago. That was because the spindle wasn't actually turning and it was just grinding the bit into the board. I was lucky the bit wasn't ruined by this. I'll mention here that I'm using a tip from Jay Bates that I picked up on one of his YouTube videos, which was to attach sacrificial 2x4s to the table cross members so that you can just use regular screws to screw your spoil board down into them and not have to worry about actually aligning everything and getting it bolted into the extrusion. You can notice here I just draped the dust collector hose down from the ceiling, and it was catching on the gantry, so I had to kind of mind it and push it if it got caught up there. In the next part I built a little support for the hose to kind of keep it from doing that. And now it's time to confess something here. Where you're going to see me installing the rotary axis is not actually where it ended up being. As you can see, I've got quite a bit of space to the right of the area that I install it here. So I actually took this all apart and moved that cross member, did a little bit of reconfiguring, and moved it more towards the end of the machine because I had very little clearance for my spoil board surfacing bit, and it was just a little bit too close for comfort. So I didn't record all of that, though. Basically the same process as this, just moved over about 8 inches to the right. Okay, when it came time to build the vertical table, I actually reconfigured the end of the machine down by the 0 point a little bit. And so as you can see here, the cross member that used to be all the way down at the end of the machine is actually moved, I think, about 10 inches towards the center of the machine. And that allowed me to take the set of legs that AVID sent me. I was missing in the original order. So they sent them to me when we got the identified the missing parts, and I was able to use them for the vertical table at that point, and then keep the original legs out at the very end, which made for a nice mount surface for the vertical table. Unlike the spoiler boards on the top, for the vertical work table, I didn't plan on this, ever coming off. It's not something that's going to get surfaced or cut into. So I just measured out the pattern for mounting and actually mounted it using the bolts that come with the spoil board fastener kit, which worked great. So I saw a lot of different ways that people installed T-tracks onto their machines on YouTube videos. Some folks were cutting strips of MDF, some were using plywood. I just wanted to use the machine itself to cut the grooves for the T-tracks. But that meant that I wanted to have 2 spoil boards instead of just 1, because I felt like as deep as I wanted to go with the grooves, it was going to end up taking too much strength out of the spoil board, and I didn't want to do that without something to support it. Also, I have the bench dog holes on the top spoiler board that go all the way through, and they are recesses in the bottom one. They line up so that the bench dogs can just go right down in there and sit, and they're plenty solid. So when I went to Dry Fit and install the T-tracks, one of the things that I noticed is the last two here, and you see me kind of recutting them and checking and recutting and checking. The Z-axis, it seemed, had missed a step or something where it wasn't completely flat on the bottom. There was like one pass that was a little bit higher than the others, so I ended up just kind of eyeballing and then pushing the bit down further until I had it flat. So at this point I'm getting ready to surface the top spoil board, and I wanted to use my 2-inch surfacing bit to really fine-tune the tramming of the gantry. And so did a series of passes, taking off just very small amounts and then checking, because it was a lot easier to see than using like a 1/2 inch or a 1/4 inch bit if you had any angle there. And I was able to get it pretty much perfect, but it took a number of adjustments. The laptop that I use to run Mach 4 is already pretty bad at sucking dust and getting clogged up in the cooling system. So operating it in this environment with sawdust, it was very clear that I was going to have to come up with a better solution to make sure it didn't bite the dust on me. And so I designed this laptop enclosure cabinet with some storage space, and it has a built-in fan, and it has a dado slot in the bottom that's sized so that you can put a 16 by 12 by 1 3M disposable home AC system filter in there, which I did, and then just taped off with AC system tape, and that keeps it nice and cool and dust free so the computer can be happy. So here I am mounting the laptop enclosure, and it's kind of funny because I always hated that support post in the garage. Just seemed like it was in the way, but now it actually turned out to be the perfect place to mount the enclosure, and it's got good proximity to the 0 point on the machine surface to be able to see when I'm using the Auto Z touch plate. All right, that just about does it for this video. Hope to see you on some future projects here. Have a great day.